I would like you to join me in welcoming B. Michael and Dawn Davis in conversation.
Hello, everybody. It is so special for me to be here. I've heard so much about MOAD and the activities that you do, and Jill's always inviting me out. It's the first time that I actually made it, and to be in conversation with B. Michael, who I have had the privilege of wearing since one of my fancy authors invited me to a gala and said, "What are you wearing?" And I was like, "A gown from Macy's," and I thought she was going to pass out because this was going to be a very fancy gown. And I've had the privilege of watching you work, wearing your clothes. I'm wearing today. He made this when I had to go on TV.
Yes.
They said wear bright colors. And also just watching you dress some of the most powerful women in New York. So it's a privilege to be here. Thank you. Let's get started with how you came to meet Miss Tyson and what that moment was like when you were called to interact with her.
I never tire of answering that question. So I get a call. In fact, the woman that brought us together, her name is Susan Fales-Hill, and Susan was your author. Susan, at that time, was also my muse, and she is a surrogate niece of Cicely. Her mom, Josephine Premise, Diane Carroll, and Cicely Tyson were friends, true Golden Girls. And so Cicely said to Susan, "Who is this designer you've been wearing? And do you think I could call him?" So I get a call, and it's Joey Mills, who is a makeup artist, really renowned, called, and he said, "I'm here with Cicely Tyson. She'd like to know if you would dress her for Oprah Winfrey's Legends Ball." And I said, "Of course, yes." And he says, "Well, she's here with me now and she wants to come right over." And in 30 minutes, Cicely Tyson was at the door of my atelier. So I had no time to process this. And she comes in and she said, "It's black and white as the invitation requires guests to wear black and white, and you have 5 days." And that's how we met.
Incredible. I have seen some of the work that you've done, and I've admired it, and they said, "Oh, B did that." And then I'll ask you about it, and you'll say, "Oh, yeah, I did that in 1 day." I mean, the way you work is extraordinary. So you dressed her for the Oscars, you dressed her for the Tonys, you dressed her for state dinner with the Obamas when she met the French president. Of all of these assignments, what was the most challenging one for you? Are you ever stumped?
That's a great question. Interesting, when she was nominated for a Tony Award, I said to her, "Well, I think I really have to pray to God about what this dress should look like." And she was in the show Trip to Bountiful, the only person in the show, and then she was early 90s, and they extended the show twice, and she never missed a performance. And she had not won a Tony, and I just thought, surely this is the moment you're getting a Tony, and we can't just do a pretty dress. And so I did a dress, and when you read the book, the dress got lots of comments, of which I own them all. My favorite is that it was described as a purple scrunchie. But to answer your question, when Cicely called me, just emotional. And I thought, what's going on? And so when she finally could, catch her breath, she said to me, "I just got off the phone with the president of the Academy and my manager, and they said that I will be receiving an honorary Oscar." And so then, of course, I also got emotional. But then in true Cicely spirit, she inserted some levity, and she said, "Well, you went to God for the Tonys, so who are you going to for the Oscars?" But that was the moment that I felt like I really have to, this dress represents decades of her work. And so, I have a responsibility here. And that, I believe, would be the answer to your question.
I love that. And one of the things when you were telling that story about some people loved the dress she wore to the Tonys and some people called it a scrunchie.
Yes.
And you got some flack online where it's so easy to just take cheap shots, right?
Right.
And someone said, well, the designer just won't show up. He won't, reveal himself. And you write in your book, no one asked her when she was on the red carpet who designed her gown, and it was one example of how the fashion industry consistently sidelines Black actresses and Black designers way back then in 2013. So I guess my question is, what are we, 10 years out now? Have things changed? Do you think people are more interested in who Black actresses and actors are wearing? Are we more part of the dialogue?
So here is my response to that very well stated question. Then, or maybe earlier, I actually cared if people were interested. And now I don't. I mean, I really don't. I think that, I am damn good at what I do, and it speaks for itself. And if you're not interested, that's on you. I think that it's really about owning and having our presence and not relying on someone else to tell us or validate us.
100%. And I've seen that evolution in you as well. I've experienced that. So you get the call, you're dressing her for what you think is one extraordinary weekend with Oprah, the ball. And you were then dressing her periodically. And at one point she said, I think you need to be the person all the time. What was that like and how did that happen?
I was with Cicely at the Emmys in Los Angeles, and she said to me, I don't know what I'm wearing. So from her wardrobe, I pulled a black Issey Miyake dress that she had. And we got ready, and I was her date, and we went to the Emmys, and everyone's yelling at her. And now we're at the dinner, and, we're at the table and just having fun. And she leaned over, and she said, I think I have to start wearing you exclusively. Just like no warning. But, I was prepared and recognized that with that comes a charge and a responsibility. But that she, just had that impulse and just was led and charged, and her intention to state that became a beginning of a different kind of a journey.
So she had an aesthetic of her own when you met her, right?
Yes.
And so what is your role as a designer to take, I think you didn't call it boho chic, but you call it...
Bohemian chic.
Bohemian
Yes.
chic. So she's this bohemian chic woman with a lot of style. She was a former model. How do you take someone with an aesthetic and style of their own and then, I don't know, is the word elevate it, transform it, work with it? How do you engage in that?
So when Cicely showed up at my door that first time, she was already 80 years old. So that's our starting point. And as you stated, she started her career as a model. She had already, there was an aesthetic about her. But for me, meeting her, I only knew her as Rebecca running through the field in Sounder, or Miss Jane Pittman walking to the fountain. And so the idea now of making that image glamorous, I decided that my role would be, you are Hollywood royalty. And so we are going to take you, that's the elevation, that's what the motivation is, that we will present you as Hollywood royalty, and that there will be a real contrast to the kind of roles that you play, and that the world will see you as Cicely Tyson, Hollywood royalty.
I love that. I love that. We were so lucky that you brought 4 extraordinary pieces. And I know that there is a story. One of the great things about the book, if you haven't had a chance to read it, is like you could read the book just as, eye candy and the fabrics and the designs. You could also read the stories and then, it just amplifies it that much more. So I know that each of these dresses has a story. Tell us the story behind this red dress, which is so beautiful.
That is maybe the most special dress for me, because I started my very first collection. I started my career as a millinery designer, which is fancy for ladies' hats.
And you did them for Dynasty.
And I did them for Dynasty, yes. aging myself. I was a young lad. But I launched my very first couture collection on New York Fashion Week calendar for fall/winter 1999. And when you do a runway collection, each look is numbered. And so if, as I stated, I shared, if you're doing 40 looks, then you number your dresses 1 through 40. So for that very first collection, the red dress behind me was look number 1 of my very first collection. So it's very special. Fast forward decades later, Cicely Tyson is now going to be photographed as the cover of Time magazine. And the magazine requested that she wear red. And at the moment in the atelier, I just did not have a red dress. And I thought, I'll just pull out this dress. And I had fabric that matched the dress and draped the collar. And so she's on the cover of Time magazine. Again, we're making history. We didn't even realize it in terms of her cover. But it was just so divine for me that I could use that dress for such a meaningful moment to both of us. And so that's the dress.
So you had the fabric and you were
Yes.
able to kind of
And drape the collar. It has an open neckline in its original design, but this is the exact dress, and I just draped the collar on top of the dress. And Cicely loved it so much, I think she wore it at least 10 times.
I love that in the book you learn that she would rewear pieces and she would maybe add a different hat or wear her hair in a different style, which would give the look a whole different thing. By the way, we are going to take questions from the audience, and rather than wait to the end, we're going to make it more interactive. So I'll continue to ask questions, but as they come to you, I will ask you as well. So I, like I said, have had the privilege of being dressed by you, and I think of you as doing beautiful and interesting necklines. Like, I think this has an interesting neckline. Gorgeous sleeves, and like the trumpet column, and then the laser cut. Those are, I would say, and the bolero jacket. You are the king of the bolero jacket. But talk to us about the laser cut and this gown in particular.
So this gown I created for Cicely to receive the Spingarn Medal, which is the highest medal given by the NAACP. And I thought to do a white gown so that she would be on this vast stage wearing the medal, and it would be a great sort of backdrop for it, but not wanting her to look like a debutante. So I, for the first time, worked with laser cutting, and that's how I created this dress, which she also loved. When you look in the book, we went back to the suite. Normally we go back to the suite after an event, and Cicely gets undressed and puts on a robe and so forth. She did not want to take this dress off. And you see a photo of her on the sofa in the dress. I thought she was going to sleep in it, in fact. And so in this dress, in the suite, she ate fried chicken, we had champagne, and finally it's like, you have to take the dress off. But
I love that. There is a line that you allude to. There's an organization called the Council of Fashion Designers of America. And I guess that's the association that all designers belong to. And you write, it was through the Council of Fashion Designers of America that you realized you were a, quote, Black designer. What did you mean by that?
when I left home to become a designer, I just saw myself as a designer. I didn't think of, I'm a Black designer or I'm a 6 foot tall designer I just saw myself as a designer. And what's interesting is in all those early years and continue to show on the New York Fashion Week calendar. And the press would start calling, asking, well, what is it like to be the only Black designer earlier on showing on the New York Fashion Week calendar? And I thought, well, what is this about? So, the first couple of seasons, I answered the question. And then by the third call, I thought, if you're not calling me to ask me, what is my, what palette am I showing, or what's my theme for this season, then don't call me.
Right.
because it's not about me being a Black American designer. You're covering Fashion Week, so call me to cover fashion. But it wasn't until the industry actually dictated to me, and I love who I am. It's not an identity issue for me, but it's, you don't call Tom Ford white designer.
Right.
And so for me, it's just like, well, let's have this conversation about fashion or not.
I completely understand. As someone also in the arts, working as I'm a book editor first and
Yes.
foremost, and 90% of the books that I do deal with the African diaspora, but I am an editor. That is my skill. That is my craft.
Absolutely.
We have to talk about this cover look. I don't know, you probably remember, and then we're going to go to the question. You probably remember seeing this when she got her when she won the Oscar, the honorary
Oscar, yes.
That piece, and I have seen your work up close. I have seen it, you go to the Studio Museum in Harlem Gala, and 30% of the room is dressed in B. Michael. And I'm like, that's B. Michael? That's B. Michael? Oh, yes, I love that B. Michael. And we're kind of like a sorority. Like, oh, we're B. Michael.
I have them brainwashed.
But the inspiration for this, the line, the fabric, it is just so beautiful. And I know that you design out of your head, but this one in particular is a standout. How? What was the inspiration?
Again, understanding that this dress will represent the breadth of Cicely Tyson's work in terms of what the Oscar means. And, I just said, again, this cannot just be a pretty dress, not even a beautiful dress. It has to have something. And so the fabric I will begin with, I purchased on a buying trip in Europe. And I bought it from a mill that at the time in the 50s and 60s did the fabric for all of the haute couture houses, like when Dior himself was designing his collection and Yves Saint Laurent and so forth. And they closed, and an agent bought the fabric. And so I was meeting with the agent, and he says, I have this fabric. Mark Anthony was with me, and we were meeting friends afterwards for lunch, and I said to him, why don't you go join our friends for lunch? I did not want him to know what I was paying for this fabric. And I just thought there will be a day when I will use the fabric. And so that was the opportunity. And the fabric is a vertical stripe, and I didn't want it to just be a stripe. Yeah. And so I took the pattern apart, and the dress is actually made of 144 pieces. And each piece we swatched to go in a different direction. It was insane, but it was what the moment required.
Do you hear this level of detail that he does, and the draping and just every detail? It is extraordinary. It really is. We had a question, and then I'm going to tell my fabric story. You don't even know what I'm going to say. I don't think. Yes, we have a question. Okay, great. Coming with a microphone.
I'm curious how diverse your student body was at FIT when you went there, or not diverse.
That's the first time I've been asked that question. And actually, I don't even recall because I never focused on it. I was, Ann Obrizio was my professor who I just adored. And in actuality, I don't know. I come from Connecticut. I just never focused on it. But it's a great question. It really is a great question. And unfortunately, I can't even in my mind's eye recall it. But thank you.
Yes, Denise. Here comes the mic.
Thank you. Back to the dress, this amazing dress that you just shared, this beautiful story about that's on the cover of the book. So for that particular art piece, how long did it take you to put it together? You said it was 140. Yeah. How long did that take you to think about and decide which way the lines were going to go? And
that's a great question. And I remember it well. It took us, I would say, probably we put in terms of hours, maybe 80 hours of hands-on work on that one piece.
Wow.
Yes.
I see there are other hands. I want to ask you about the collaboration process with Cicely, but also your other clients. I remember when we worked together on the gown that I wore to the Met Gala, and we had a fabric. You showed me a little swatch. I fell in love with it. And then you said after, it's Italy, we don't have that fabric, but I've picked another fabric for you, and I panicked. Did Cicely ever panic? Did she see like an outline of a gown and say, that's not what I want? What was that like?
So the thing about Cicely is she gave me free rein. Absolutely never, ever even was curious about what the dress would look like. And she loved to say, I have no idea what I'm wearing until B shows up with the dress.
That's total faith.
That is total
just
faith.
100%
Absolutely.
faith.
The only time she ever gave me pushback was when the morning we're in Detroit getting dressed to attend Aretha Franklin's funeral.
The hat.
The hat. And so I take out of the hat box a hat that's like the size of this table. And Cicely said, what are you doing with that? I'm not wearing that hat. I said, of course you are. And now, mind you, I had a small hat with me as a backup. Don't tell her, because I didn't at the time. But I said, you have to wear this hat, and the car is downstairs, and we have to be at the church, in this window. So she put the hat on, but that was pushback. And I can say to you, the moment we walked into the church, there was like a hush. Wow. And it was as if the queen had arrived, and indeed the queen did arrive. But in the suite, I actually said to her, Aretha, we call the Queen of Soul, and you are the queen of our culture, and you really have to show up this morning this way. And 8 hours after we left the funeral, get into the car, I turn on my phone, and we discovered that the hat had gone viral. And Cicely would say, it's the first time in my career I've been upstaged by a hat.
I love that. I'm gonna ask you about accessories, but I think we have more questions. Let's take one from this side of the audience, and then we'll come back over here.
Good evening. It's such an honor to be in your presence. I appreciate the comment that you made about both answering the question and not answering it, because invisibility is a real issue still in our community, but then also you want your talents to speak for you. So I appreciate answering the question and not answering it. How have you decided over your career whom you would dress, and have you made decisions about whom you would not dress? And I'm not asking you to name names, but how did you make the decision?
That is a very good question.
That is a scary question.
And have I ever been on your bad side?
About who you wouldn't dress also.
Wow. Okay. I need another glass of wine. But the truth is, I never looked at a person and said, I would not dress you. So if that were ever the dynamic, it would be that the person would feel that. But I never felt like I would not dress you. I think that the idea of dressing someone, fashion is subjective, and I don't expect that everyone, that what I do might not be your taste. And so I don't take it personal if it's like, I'm not wearing you. But I've never really met someone that I felt like I won't dress you. I think that dressing someone is intimate, there's emotion, for me, it's art. Because I do couture, I always want to sort of align with the individual. So we have to have that happening. And in the absence of that, perhaps we don't get to it. But it's not that I look at you for any other reason and say that I'm not going to dress you.
We had a question over here.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm not in a...
Do I have to press anything, or is it? Oh, here. So lovely to see you, and I was just curious about your process. Do you sketch first? Do you fit? Do you make patterns? Just how do you do the work? You know, It's so amazing, and it's lovely to see these dresses.
Thank you. So I do sketch a lot, but what's interesting is, so I have just mounds of sketches because, you know, a thought comes and you sketch, and I always have my pad within reach. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to become a dress in that moment. I may go back and remember I did this sketch whenever it was that I sketched it, or I'll see a piece of fabric and think, oh my God, this would be great as whatever. So I'm very open as to the source for the, you know, where it comes from for the creativity, because anything can instigate something. And I like being open like that.
My question is along the same lines as Peggy, because, you know, now I find so many people are not as prepared, but I want to ask, do you sew?
So I do not sew. And I don't sew because I don't have the patience for it. But what I am is like the people who work with me, Reyes, as you know, it's like, no, honey, you have to do it this way. So for me, it's more important that I know how to do it and that I can give you the direction. But it's not my thing to sit down and spend the time doing that. I just don't have the patience for that. And even in terms of pattern draping, you know, my draper has been with me for 20 years, and she studied at FIT. And every now and then, Reyes will say, well, you know, that's not how the line should go. And I will say to her, who said that? And so I love that she says to me, wow, I would never have thought that that could work. And so for me, it's more about the creative process than it is about being a technician.
I want to ask you about accessories. I know when I went to the Met Gala, you said, may I do your accessories, because you know that I'm horrible at that. And you got me jewelry, you got me a purse. And then in this book, you write about the state dinner with the Obamas and the French president. You accessorized her as well? I mean, would you accessorize Miss Tyson, or?
Absolutely. I would never let anyone else accessorize Miss Tyson, because as a designer, first of all, even when I'm doing my collection, it's about seeing the total look. So I've worked with, you know, Armand, who was our hair and makeup artist.
Extraordinary.
Yes, still had to take direction from me. I mean, I'm a nice guy, but this is about the look. And so from head to toe, makeup, hair, everything, shoe, totally, it's got to be about that vision, about my vision. And there's no compromise.
I see your question. I want to ask one more. I see your hand. At some point, it went, and it seems like it went pretty quickly based on reading the book, from a professional relationship to a very personal one. You were called the Thirds with your partner, Mark Anthony, who's both your husband and your business partner, referred to you as the Thirds. And it's a very tender moment in the book where she herself published her memoir. And she had a day full of interviews and media, and said, you know what? Call Mark Anthony and make dinner. And tell us that story, because it was more than a professional relationship.
When Cicely appeared at my door, again for that first encountering, she nor I could know what the universe, what was a divine order as a journey for the two of us. How could we have known that? And as that relationship evolved, divinely, organically, you know, and then seeing her intention as an artist and her intention to embrace me as an artist and what that meant, which evolved to this real trust that we shared. And she named us the Thirds, yes. So her book, she said, you have to help me with my book, Just As I Am, her memoir. And so 24/7, it's just like, okay. Her book published on January 26th of 2021.
You guys spoke to each other every day
Every
at
day.
9:30 in the morning.
Yes.
And you were more than her, you know, dress or costume designer. You were
Yes.
her
Yes,
companion.
we were, absolutely. And so on January 26, 2021, her book is published. We're together as we had been. You know, we were in the same bubble through the pandemic and all of that. So she said, call Mark Anthony and tell him I'm coming home with you for dinner. And I thought, okay. And I think at this stage, it's like very late in the afternoon. I don't know what magic he's going to work, but I'll call him. And indeed, you did work magic. And she came home with me. We had a fabulous dinner of salmon, both of our favorites, collard greens, brown rice. We sat at our dining room table for hours. We did not talk about the book, although it published that day. We just talked and had fun, had a pot of tea, and then, very uncharacteristic, she even asked for dessert. So we had dessert. Then she announced, I think I want to take a bath. So I made a lavender Epsom salt bath for her, and she slept in our guest room. And the following morning, which is January 27, she was to do Kelly, at that time, Kelly and Ryan. The car was coming to the apartment at 5 a.m. I go into the guest room. I'm tired. So I said to her, you're Cicely Tyson. We could really cancel this. And given her work ethic, she said, absolutely not. Let's go. So we go to my atelier. She does the Ryan and Kelly. I said, you have the afternoon off, and now you can go home and relax. And we do not have another thing until tomorrow. And this is the call time. So I sent her home, and she went home and went to sleep. And that was it.
It's incredible that
Yes.
you spent your last.
She gave us her last night, had supper with us, and I'm telling you, this was on her terms. She had a conversation with God that we should all be privy to have, indeed. But it was totally on her terms.
And I'm so glad as a book publisher that she got to write her own legacy and publish her own story.
Yes,
That was
and so her book came out on the 26th. And mind you, in the weeks leading up to it, she kept saying, I just got to get to the 26th. And she was well. It's not as though she was ill or any of those things. And she got to the 26th.
It's incredible.
That is
It
incredible.
is
I mean,
incredible.
come on. And at 96, the day she went home and went to sleep, she still did her appearance, full makeup, everything at 96.
Incredible.
It is.
I saw a hand. Yes. Hi. Back there.
Hello. So excited to see you again, B. Michael. I want to first thank you publicly for being the first couture designer on the runway of Fashion on the Square, the show that I've produced for over 15 years. But it was your appearance at that show that opened up Fashion on the Square, where all the other couture designers began to come and grace us on the runway. So thank you. And then you came back again.
Yes. And there's a B. Michael Day, thanks to you,
Yes.
as the mayor at that time.
Yes.
Yes. Right.
Proclamation, the whole,
Proclamation.
yes.
I think it's July 25 is B. Michael Day in San Francisco.
Yes, it is.
Proclamation.
It was always the last Saturday in July, so yes, you are right. And the question was, oh my God, I forgot.
When he comes back to you.
Yes.
We do have one in the second row here.
I'm sitting here almost wanting to catch my breath with the euphoria that you create, and at the same time feeling my feet so grounded because of your groundedness. In this world of lyrical, beautiful celebrity and creativity and art, how do you stay so grounded?
Such a great question and very perceptive.
Yes, thank you. I think for me, it's the idea of exactly that, being grounded. I mean, I love what it is that I get to do. I feel very fortunate and very blessed that I can live and be my art in that way. But at the same time, I know that there's someone much greater than me that's in charge. And so we both begin our day meditating. You know, we feel that we always have to be grounded in that way. Also, the idea that, I mean, respecting each other. We all do what we do, but just to respect each other is a very important for us. And I would also say that, you know, I think that you see me here, and I've been blessed to do all of this, but it's a journey. Most definitely a journey. And the only way you survive a journey is to know who's in charge, you know, to have that kind of connection. And so I cannot imagine being without it. And so if you feel that from me, and I'm happy that you do, because I want to believe that that is who I am, it's because I know who's in charge, and it's not me.
But you are incredibly humble. I remember the first time you came to the vineyard, and, you know, I was like, well, it's just a very plain house, and there's not going to be anything fancy. And you were like, I don't need anything fancy. I want to escape fancy. And, you know, meanwhile, you've dressed Beyoncé, you've dressed Whitney Houston, you've just dressed so many people. Whitney Houston, you've just dressed so many incredible people. You never talk about your clients. It's just another day of work for you, you know? You approach everyone as we're all the same.
We are all the same, and we each have our own charge, whatever it is that you're doing. You know, an editor, publisher, whatever it is that we are doing, we each have our own charge. And so our intention has to be to bring excellence to what we do, but we have to be humble. We most definitely have to understand we're just one of part of a human race.
Let me ask you a little bit about the collaborative process. You were asking about the artistic process, but when you meet a new client, you get a call. I've been with you, like someone's coming tomorrow, or they're going to go to some gala in a week and they need some beautiful frock. What do you want to know about them? Is it an energy thing? Is it a professional thing? Is it a lifestyle? Like, what questions do you ask?
So it is an energy because, and I say that because how one sees oneself. For instance, Cicely was only this high, but I never thought about her as being short. She could really, as I often say, negotiate a 12-yard sweep. I mean, I dressed her as if she was a giant. Yeah. And so that's what I want to know about a person. Like, who are you? How do you see yourself? So that we, you know, I have women say, oh, I can't wear this or I can't wear that. And I'm like, you can, but you can't see yourself wearing this or wearing that. And so, you know, I think that's what's most important.
Are any questions I don't want to? Oh, yes.
Hi. Thank you for being here. Gosh. My question is really about legacy. And younger designers, African American designers, do they look at you? Do they look back at you? Are they saying, oh my gosh? You know, do they understand their history? Sort of like with painting, you know, do they understand who Norman Lewis was? Do they understand who, you know, I don't know, Kerry James Marshall is compared to younger artists like Gerald Gibbs. So how do they perceive you? How do they look at you? Because your legacy is obviously massive. You've made a massive difference in the entire fashion world. But I just want to know, do they know who you are?
Wow. So I will say this. My atelier is in the Garment Center, which I have been in the Garment Center since I started in 1999. And one of the things that always moves me on a daily basis, I'm running around, and particularly when a young Black American will stop me and just say, oh my God, or you inspire me. For me, what that means is that I represent to that individual the possibilities. And so that's what's important. And that is indeed what the legacy is about. And that was Cicely's intention. And that's what we shared and collaborated on. And so at first I thought, I'm too young to be a legacy. But legacy is really about, you know, the idea of my responsibility to make it easier for the next generation, and that I can represent what can be possible. And so I no longer think about what can't happen or who's stopping us. No such thing. It's possible. And that's the legacy.
One of the things that was really exciting to see, speaking about legacy, was there was a wonderful exhibit in Delaware of Anne Lowe's work. And Anne Lowe, as you know, designed Jackie Onassis's gown. Her studio burned down 9 days before the wedding. She redesigned Jackie's gown and the bridesmaid's gown in
when
9 days.
she married John Kennedy.
Not designed them, remade them. Dressed a lot of the debutantes on the East Coast. And at the end of that exhibit, they had designers who were carrying forth her legacy. And you were in the last room, which was, to be in dialogue with someone like that must have been like a high point of your life, I would
Totally. Anne Lowe should be a household name, really. The woman we're talking a Black American woman, had a boutique on Madison Avenue. I mean, in the 50s. And she designed, as you said, the dress that Jackie Kennedy wore when she married John Kennedy. The New York Times did a great piece on the Camelot wedding and this couture gown and all of the detail and never mentioned her name. And so that I could be viewed in that same scope as the level of her work was indeed an honor, but truly legacy.
You have written that Givenchy had Audrey Hepburn and you have Miss Tyson.
Yes.
And I would say, just knowing the quality of your craftsmanship, that if you had been born 20 years later, your name would be as prolific as Givenchy. You are in that league, bar none, as far as I'm concerned. And as far as anyone who's had the pleasure of
Thank you.
touching, seeing, being in your studio, it is really, really extraordinary. I knew there would be great questions. So if you haven't asked one, anybody? I see some people over here. Yes.
While you're getting your question, what we actually would say, Cicely and I, we shared this and it became our calling card. Givenchy had Audrey Hepburn and B. Michael has Cicely Tyson.
Well,
yes.
And now the world knows, thanks to
And
you
now the world
also
knows.
having your legacy documented
Yes.
in a book, and I'm very proud of the publishing industry for doing that. So we have a question.
Would you tell the story about the dress that's behind Ellen, the brown dress?
Yes, I love this story.
Yes. So there is a state-of-the-art, multi-million-dollar school in East Orange named after Cicely Tyson. And she only agreed to it if she could be involved. And I assure you, she walked the halls of the school. She created tremendous opportunities for the students in the school. And so when the school did its inaugural opening of the new building, this is the dress that I created for Cicely to wear for that opening. And I said to her, it's the texture in all the shades of brown really represent all of the students that are walking the corridors of your school. And she loved the idea of that as an art and a metaphor. It was just amazing.
I know that story stumped me when I read it, but also the different fabric. The fabric is beautiful. What is this fabric?
So it's a textile, and it's really, I use the double face of the fabric, but it's a textile from Eastern Europe.
I'm so glad we actually had a question, because this is from a man, because we had a very funny moment. We were going to the Studio Museum of Harlem, again, the gala, and Dawn Porter, who some of you may know, she lived in San Francisco for a while. She's a prize-winning documentary maker. She did the John Lewis film, and she was going to wear B. Like I said, we all wear B, and her husband got his tux from, she goes, oh, what's this Amazon package? And he's like, my tux. And we were like, no. She cannot be wearing B. Michael, and you're wearing your tux from Amazon.
No.
So you quickly, fix that situation.
We absolutely bespoke. I'm like, I know you're the husband, but I'm the designer, and you will not stand next to her in your Amazon suit.
Yes. We had a question, and then you. Yes.
So speaking of legacy, thank you. Speaking of legacy, do you own the entire collection of Miss Tyson's gowns, or?
Yes, I do. We do. Yes. Important. Yes.
We had question. That gentleman right here and the third right here.
Well, just once again, it's wonderful to be in your space today. My question is, it's been about 25 years of your atelier. I'm wondering what you envision the next 25 years looking like, or just what walls you haven't scaled yet that you aspire to? What keeps you going?
Great question, and from a young person, it's a wonderful question. And so I feel like I'm just starting, which is great. You know, when I get up in the morning, I'm excited, I'm going to work, you know, the creativity is flowing. And as a business model, that's probably a question for Mark Anthony, but I'll do my best. But so we are now evolving to doing what will be my real first designer ready-to-wear collection. And so he's excited about that. And I'm excited about the idea, though, that it will be influenced by my point of view as a couturier. So, you know, fabrication and construction and fit will be very important. And my clients wear Valentino and they wear Chanel and Dior. And so, you know, that's the level where we compete. And I am excited that we will have that opportunity and we will curate it because it will first be launched on our own e-commerce website. So that's what's next. Yes.
I can't imagine what it must have been like to have dressed her for Obama and that event with the French president, which is the area of couture, and all that entailed. And that moment must have been extraordinary.
That was an extraordinary moment, and because it was, you know, France, I said, okay, we really have to make sure. And I sort of used the Jackie Kennedy era as my inspiration to dress Cicely for that event. And mind you, it was in the middle of Fashion Week, and we had to create this gown as we are also creating a runway collection. But of course, we managed to do it, and it was really quite special.
I see a hand in the back on, yes.
She also received the Medal of Freedom from President Obama, and her Kennedy Center honors was also during his administration. So we had lots of visits to Washington and great dresses to take.
Hello, hi. I just wanted to ask, you had mentioned that you had started your work specifically on the set of Dynasty. Has that level of rigor and that level of detail and that need to show excess always stuck with you, or was it always there with you, or has that always kind of guided you in terms of your creative process?
And you're saying from Dynasty? Yes. So interesting, when I did Dynasty, I really was very young, and I had no clue about what all of that meant at the time. Nolan Miller, who was the costumer, was really guiding the ship. And so I actually can't say that my work ethic or, you know, how I evolved was derived from that experience. But what I will say came from that experience was the idea of what creativity and those possibilities could be. And so I am grateful to have had that kind of a launching pad. And, you know, Diane Carroll and I became lifelong friends. And I mean, so clearly it was an opportunity, but it wasn't where I really cut my teeth.
Was it through Diane that you met Susan Fales-Hill?
It is not through Diane that I met Susan. I met Susan through Eleanor Lambert. Okay. And then discovered that she was connected with Diane.
And for those in the room, Eleanor Lambert, do you want to give some context?
So Eleanor Lambert really is considered she founded the CFDA. There was the International Best Dress List, she founded that. when there was the Battle of Versailles, and you can Google that, which was this thing of American designers versus French designers, and she came up with that as a publicity stunt, and that's another story but that I won't get into now. But Eleanor really and truly was the quintessential fashion publicist. And the fact that she embraced me for my inaugural collection, I mean, I couldn't even afford to be in the room with her, but she respected my talent and said, you know, I got you. And so that was really wonderful. But that's how I met Susan.
Got it. Any other questions?
I can just say, do you design pantsuits?
Of course, I designed a full collection.
Okay.
Yes.
Gorgeous. There is a beautiful one in the book that Cicely's wearing. It's the white one with B, of course, there's a beautiful
Yes, when we did the hand and footprint ceremony, and Cicely said, I don't know what I'm wearing, but you do know I have to get down on my knees. I said, I got it. And truly, it was so much fun to put her in that pantsuit.
I have a pair of your I have a pair of pants that you designed that I put on and was supposed to give back, and I just cannot bear to.
No.
They're so beautiful. The fabric is beautiful, the line is beautiful, and then there's just this gorgeous band of gold down the side. The attention to detail is amazing. I had them on last night, that's true. Anybody else? Any story about a piece that we haven't talked about that you particularly love? I love the one with the feathers.
Yes, that dress was worn to the Oscars, to the Academy, and then later to the Vanity Fair party. And that was, again, at this stage, Cicely is probably 94, and the dress is completely hand-beaded with Austrian crystals and Swarovski crystals and ostrich feathers. And this woman at 94 wore this dress all night. And I'm telling you, it's like a workout. But she looked amazing in the dress.
And that reminds me that you also have this passage in the book where you talk about women don't have to look a certain age, that your philosophy is that you dress how you feel. And she was exquisitely beautiful and sexy and vibrant in all of the looks that you gave. It wasn't...
You know, I'm glad that we're discussing that because as, you know, in working on the book, I realized, aside from the kind of history we created, and I will say, when you're doing it, you're not even knowing that you're creating history. You're just doing your work. For instance, Cicely being the first Black American to receive an honorary Oscar, and then I am the first Black American designer to dress an Oscar recipient. But when we're working on this, we didn't know it. And then that year, Ruth Carter, who also won, came to me and commissioned me to do her dress. So I did too.
Amazing.
But the point is, while you're doing it, you don't know it. You're just working. And so I think that that's part of what we did. But to answer your question about something very special, I think was your question.
Yes.
After Cicely went to sleep, as we call it, transitioned, and, you know, just thinking about that, I created the dress that she's buried in. And I thought, well, I really don't have a choice. And that dress, really special in the sense that I combined many, I should say, of what she loved about dresses that I had created for her. So the dress is a laser cut, and it has this collar, and it's in purple, which was the color we had adopted. And what was really remarkable is that as we're planning her, as we call it, homegoing, I said to the funeral directors that I have to dress her. And immediately, you know, they said, of course. And Mark Anthony said, are you sure you can do this? And I said, well, I know I've never done this before, but I've done so many things with Cicely. We had so many firsts that this will be another, but I can't imagine anyone else doing that final zip except me. And so, I mean, for me to have had that honor and to know that I did my charge for her until the end was most, I mean, I have nothing else that I can say except what a blessing that was for me.
That is such a beautiful story.
Yes.
I
Thank
can't
you.
think of a more emotionally apt way to thank you for this conversation, to thank you all for coming and asking. I knew you had asked amazing questions, and thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
And thank you, Jill.
Yes, and Moad.
Moad.
Yes, Monada, thank you. Yes.